This video presents a document which I have written 5 years ago. The content of this video is an attempt to describe my view of life and how the related knowledge could be used to improve the present world situation. The focus of the work herein proposed should be the whole world population, even if the powerful impulses, both good and bad, which have brought us where we are today, have mainly originated from Europe. In spite of this fact, social and cultural boundaries are crumbling, and we see the establishment of a world culture where racial and geographical differences are constantly losing importance. The proper impulses of our era are no more limited to Europeans and their descent, Americans, Australians, South Africans, etc., but appear everywhere in the world, regardless of the origins. One should just think about Gandhi, Mandela, Yunus, and others to understand what I mean. These individuals, not of European descent, have improved the life quality of countless people. Therefore, it is not possible anymore to think at the world as a place divided into countries, cities, continents, races, languages, religions, etc. As in every suburb of the poorest third world city, a powerful soul may be born, which in time will bring a positive impulse to the whole world. I will first give a sketchy presentation of the scientific background which is the result of my studies, life experiences and insights. The human being is roughly organized into 4 different bodies or levels of existence. I have used the term roughly because, depending on the esoteric school, more bodies may be recognized. Nonetheless, a categorization into 4 bodies may suffice for our purposes. The 4 bodies are the physical, the etheric, the astral and the spiritual, also called simply the I. The physical body is the one we know better. It includes the bones, the muscles, the blood, the tissues, the nerves, the brain, etc. It is the one vessel that allows our higher being to have an experience on earth. As such, it should be considered sacred, as it allows us to have experiences which in turn enrich and evolve our being. Without physical body, we couldn't possibly exist on the physical plane. Stones only have a physical body on the earth. The etheric body is the energetic counterpart of the physical body. Alternatively called the energetic blueprint, it is composed of subtle energy which determines the position of all our physical body elements as well as all the fluxes of liquids that move around in our bodies. The easiest way to picture it is to watch Hans Jenny's documentary about cymatics and sound figures. Dr. Jenny and others before him discovered that when you send a sound frequency on a thin surface of metallic or organic material covered with some kind of powder, depending on the frequency, the powder will position itself according to specific geometrical patterns. Every frequency has its own pattern. These images were taken while a sound frequency was sent to the membrane through a loudspeaker. The clearer lines are the powder positioned on the membrane. The most interesting thing, though, is that by more closely observing the lines, one sees that the powder is not static but is constantly moving along the lines. So it's not a static pattern but a dynamic one. In a similar manner, I visualize the etheric body. The lines in the video represent the physical structure of the body with all its fluxes, but they are determined by the vibrating membrane, which in turn vibrates according to its own properties and the sound frequency sent to it. In this parallel, the membrane would be the etheric body. By changing the properties of the membrane, for example, the tension of the drum skin, or the original frequency, another picture will appear in the powder. Plants have a physical body and an etheric body on the earth. The astral body is the plane of our emotions and sentiments. It is the body primarily involved when we have any kind of emotional feeling, like fear, love, happiness, anger, etc. Animals have a physical, an etheric, and an astral body on the earth. The last body, the spiritual or I body, is the one element that only human beings have on earth. We feel like individuals because we have the I body. It is both the most powerful element of the human being as well as the hardest to manage, as we will see later. It is the body that allows us to connect with the higher dimensions of existence. It is mainly associated with the activity of thinking, with our higher ideals of life as well as our higher purposes. These four bodies should be visualized as one inside the other. This concept points to the fact that a problem on any higher level, etheric, astral, spiritual, may have consequences on the lower levels that it contains. So an emotional problem may very well have an effect on the physical level through the associated modification of etheric fluxes. In the same way, a wrong ideal at the spiritual level may cause, over time, physical illness. This is partly true also the other way around. A physical ailment, for example, may cause emotional grief. This shows the close interconnection between the different bodies. As we have seen, present man has four bodies on the earth. But according to various spiritual investigators, it hasn't always been this way. The various bodies had to be developed over time. This doesn't mean that they weren't there, but that human beings have gradually become aware and thus given shape to one body after the other. Every period of time during which such a process takes place is called an era. The last era, which still persists today, started about 500 years ago, and its final goal is to acquire full awareness of the spiritual or I body. Before this time, one has to picture man as a being having some sort of group consciousness. For instance, in medieval Europe, there were priests who could read and write and thus lead the people of the community, who, being partly ignorant, had no way to develop their own opinions, ideas and the like, and mostly depended on the teachings of the priests. This significantly changed around the year 1500 AD, when all of a sudden we have a series of individuals who start to question the world by themselves. Just think about the great geographical discoveries, America in 1492, the circumnavigation of Africa in 1498, the invention of the printing process in 1439, and the Protestant Reformation in 1517 and the following years. This last event has, in my opinion, a very significant meaning. For the first time, man puts itself in front of God without the need of any intermediate, former priest, and thus declares itself accountable for its actions in the eyes of God. The subsequent events are a clear consequence of these facts. Through the printing process, many more people gain access to knowledge, man starts to more thoroughly investigate the natural world, and science is born. The slow but steady development of science in the following centuries tells us that man is not satisfied anymore by the previous idea that everything happens because it is God's will, but wants to personally find the causes of the processes and events that take place around him. Today and in the past century, this has gone so far that most men now believe that a God is not even necessary anymore, because with our science we have pretty much explained most of the natural phenomena of the universe. Or at least that's what most people believe. But the development of the I body is subject to a great risk. The ego, or lower I, may take supremacy in the decision-making process of the person, and so a materialistic culture, one that only tries to satisfy the most physical needs, regardless of the consequences, is developed. This resulted in environmental destruction, social and human misery, and all the unnecessary bad things that we see in the world today. It is not possible to remark enough the importance of the incarnation of the I body. Man becomes the only being on earth to be able to thoughtfully change the reality of the world around. But as such, it also acquires a great deal of responsibility for its actions. With all this historical digression, I just wanted to pinpoint the fact that the past 500 years have been an incredible time for the development of the human being. Things have happened which have never happened before in the history of mankind. Man has become, as Goethe put it, the little god on earth. Rudolf Steiner once said, "For every technological step, man needs to do 3 moral steps." It is my opinion that time has come for mankind to catch up with the moral steps. It has to be kept in mind that the incarnation of the I body, even if it has momentarily resulted in the present disastrous situation, still is an incredible advancement in the evolution of the human being, because we are now in the condition of both creating an ugly world, as we have mainly done so far, as well as a beautiful world. It all depends on us. Among the things that present science hasn't yet been able to fully explain is the most widespread phenomenon on Earth: life. Science is now able to describe in every detail all the minute processes that happen in a living organism, is able to genetically modify existing organisms according to its wishes, but has so far failed to create a living organism starting from the raw elements of which it is composed: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and others. There have been scientists who have investigated the subject and gone closer to an answer, but somehow they have gone into oblivion. At the present stage, I just want to give a general philosophical idea of my view about the basics of life. I will avoid going back in time and try to give speculative guesses on how the first living cell was formed, even if, with much luck and fantasy, that could bring us to clarify a few aspects. It would just closely relate to life on Earth, again only from a materialistic point of view. I think that life consists of more elements, as set out before. Let's instead look at the conception of a human being. There mainly is a huge mass of sperm cells, which are constantly moving in all directions, and a few static eggs awaiting for the coming of the sperm. As the sperm finds the egg cells, they fuse, and a new organism is started. These 2 cells, on their part, originate from 2 different sexes, the male and the female. The general characteristics of the 2 sexes somehow share those seen in the reproduction cells, with the male being more impulsive and ready for action, whereas the female more restrained and shape-giver. This duality, which sometimes can manifest itself as a polarity, is observed all over the living and non-living world. In fact, we have a North Pole and a South Pole on the Earth, and on magnets. We have positive and negative electrical charges, day and night, plus and minus, etc. The ancient Chinese, having recognized it some thousands of years ago, gave it the name of yin and yang. We can undoubtedly state that wherever life is manifest, duality or polarity or both are present. The plus element of duality has the characteristic of being energy in constant motion without a specific direction. The minus element has the characteristic of being pure shape. Now, neither of both can by itself create life. Only energy roaming in the universe will never settle down and create something stable. Only shape will eternally remain motionless shape. Life arises when energy is united with shape, thus animating it. The energy then starts to flow according to the characteristics of the shape, and life can exist. This may sound very philosophical, but is a fundamental concept to understand for whoever is interested in being part of the work that we intend to do. I will make a very crude example to better explain this. Just think at a normal combustion engine like you have in your car. Even there, we can recognize these two elements of duality in the gasoline and the engine. Gasoline alone would only explode when ignited and cause more damage than good. On the other hand, the engine alone would forever remain motionless. But when we properly ignite the previously injected gasoline in the engine, the car will move according to our wishes. In this example, another important element is introduced: timing. An engine will only work if all the single mechanisms and processes have been properly timed. The ignition has to take place in an exact moment of the piston cycle, otherwise the car won't move. We won't go any further into this, but keep it in mind as it also may be seen as a manifestation of polarity. So we can draw a parallel between the gasoline and the energy roaming the cosmos, as well as between the engine and the motionless shape awaiting for energy to animate it. After having studied these subjects as well as common science in the past 20 years, I have developed in the process what I would call an inner technique, which I will now present. To my aid, I will now shortly refer to the Kabbalah, an ancient esoteric tradition which is thought to have originated in ancient Egypt, or even before, and has arrived in Europe through the Israelites. The interpretations are solely mine. This tradition is based on the Tree of Life, a graph showing a series of points connected with lines. The whole description of what this image represents is beyond my capabilities, but I will give the information that I have been able to grasp with my studies and which I deem important for our project. There are 10 points aligned in 3 columns. The 3 columns somehow represent the positive, the neutral and the negative. The individual points have been associated with different elements and deities of the time when they were studied. The topmost point is the universal creator, also called universal knowledge or universal consciousness. It basically represents the origin of everything. It cannot be looked upon while living on Earth because that would cause immediate death. We can only get a feel for it, but no more. The bottom point is the physical world. Above it is the point representing the etheric plane. Then, always rising from the bottom, we have 2 polarized points which represent the emotional and the thinking plane. Above them is again a neutral point which esoteric Christians have associated with the Christ impulse. It stands right in the center of the whole graph. The following 4 points above the Christ point are polarized positions that in the past have also been related to Greek deities and their impulses to the world. The lines connecting the points represent a series of paths that the initiate could follow in his personal evolution from the bottom point to the top creator point. It has to be said that this graph can be used with proper training to do any kind of magic, both white and black. It is absolutely nothing to mess about and has to be taken very seriously. To our purposes, we are mainly interested in the bottom 5 points, as well as always to the topmost point. I still need to fully understand the meaning of the 4 other points, even though I think that some indirect hints are given later in this video. So, starting from the bottom, we have the physical and just above the etheric point, both on the neutral column of the graph. Since every point has been emanated from the point just above, I understand this fact as showing that a direct influx on the physical world has to start from the etheric world, being the etheric point above the physical. Above the etheric world are 2 points at the same level, but one in the positive and the other in the negative column. Without going into endless details, as previously said, I have associated these 2 points with the human elements of sentiment and thought. Here is a key point of the technique. Emotion or sentiment can be associated with the pure motion energy described before, whereas thought is associated with pure motionless shape. So, by uniting these 2 polarized elements, by giving motion to thought with sentiment, we can have an influx on the etheric, which in turn will influence the physical. But we haven't yet investigated where the energy is coming from. Above these 2 points is the Christ point, again in the neutral column. I identified a figure of the Christ with the term of unconditional love. I think that among the things that the Christ had to tell us through the person of Jesus is that with the right mindset and heart, we can pretty much do anything. He walked on water, multiplied food, healed a blind person, and made other miracles. I interpret this as teaching us that we have the potential to do the same. There is a straight line connecting the Christ point to the Creator point. So, if we align with the project of the Creator, we can do anything. And we can do this through the understanding of one of the impulses that the Christ gave to the world, that is, in my opinion, unconditional love. To do things this way is also the best life insurance that we can have. By aligning with the Creator as the main source of our energy, we make sure that if our desired results is not in tune with the overall plan, we will simply not receive the energy to obtain it, thus maintaining balance. This is a crucial step. If we were to obtain a result out of egoistic, personal reasons or ignorance, we could, but we would have to align to one of the polarized points of the tree. But these are all either on the positive or on the negative column. We would be stealing the energy from a polarized position, thus unbalancing the whole tree of life. And what does a tree do when it is unbalanced? It bounces back sooner or later, thus shaking the whole tree. The alignment through unconditional love to the Creator's plan is the most important and key element. From different esoteric investigators, we know that there are many spirits around us. They are organized in hierarchies, where every higher level means a more evolved multitude of spirits. They all have a task to do, and through the accomplishment of it, further evolve. To mention a few, there is a personal spirit whose task is to follow and help every individual human soul. There are group spirits whose task is to help and guide a group of people with a common purpose. There are nation spirits responsible for a whole nation's contribution to global evolution. There are time spirits whose purpose is to guide the general trend of an era, etc. Every spirit that accomplishes a task will further evolve to a higher level of hierarchy. This is also valid for man, animals, plants, and rocks. On top of it all is the higher Creator's plan. So I picture it as a whole symphony with its director and its musicians. We are among the musicians. If we play correctly along the symphony plan, we can obtain everything. If we start playing on our own a completely different music, we create dissonance and chaos. The symphony will not sound good. Therefore, our main concern is to play along the director's guidelines. That is, I believe, also through unconditional love. On a more physical level, we may identify this universal symphony with the total sum of all the cosmic radiations hitting the Earth. These rays, also identified as particles, neutrinos and others, are a well-established scientific fact. There are about 65 billion neutrinos per square centimeter per second hitting the Earth's surface, and these are only those coming from the Sun. In the sound figure's parallel, all these radiations coming from the Sun, the Moon, the planets and the stars would be the sound. We then need the membrane, etheric medium, that vibrates according to this radiation. I would identify it with the Earth's magnetic field and also other more subtle elements. The physical Earth, with all the living beings on it, is the result of the vibration of the ether. In Hansianist sound figures, the physical world would be the powder with its pattern and fluxes. This same model can be applied macrocosmically to the Earth and life on it, as well as microcosmically to every single organism. Reality, according to this view, is partly the result of energy coming from the cosmos, as ancient people have always believed. partly because we, as humans, are also responsible for the shaping of reality. The question may arise as to what are the differences between unconditional love and love. Let's start from one common form of love. That is, when a man loves a woman or a woman loves a man crazily. The internal feelings are so strong that they may sometimes degenerate into a form of fear. Fear that the other doesn't want you, fear that he has another love, jealousy, possessiveness, etc. These are all forms of fear that may arise as a secondary effect of crazy love. These may become so strong that the person may succumb to them. Now think about when you have someone dear that you are really fond of. You buy or make the person a gift. Your biggest pleasure is to give the person the gift and thus make him or her happy. You don't have any expectations. That is the great difference between love and unconditional love. Expectations. The crazy in love man or woman, which has any one of the above listed fears, has expectations, whereas the person giving the gift hasn't any. Expectations immediately raise the primary fear that they won't be fulfilled. In this way, the attention shifts from the powerful feeling of love to the fear for love, and that causes the degeneration of the initial feeling of love. But how can unconditional love achieve such powerful deeds as we intend to do? I will later detail the more technical aspects of the technique, but as a start, if we believe in what has previously been set out about the spirit hierarchies and our purpose is aligned with the Creator's plan, they may very well give us a hand. From a more scientific point of view, I will shortly recount about the Russian scientist George Lakhovsky. He lived in the first half of the 20th century and studied life and the human being from an electromagnetic point of view. One of his main achievements was the invention of a machine composed of several concentric circular antennas which would send a broad spectrum of electromagnetic waves to the body and so heal a lot of different diseases. According to his theory, a disease was manifest at the etheric level as a part of the body or the whole body vibrating at a frequency different from that of health. Remember Hans Jenny and his sound figures? So, by sending a broad spectrum of frequencies, he might very well have a chance to also send the one equal to the disease, and through a process of wave cancellation, allow the body to re-establish the normal health frequency. For those who are not familiar with sound and frequencies, if I send to a loudspeaker two sound waves with exactly the same frequency but with a phase shift of 180 degrees, no sound will come out of the speaker because in every instant the sum of the two waves equals zero. This is also the principle of homeopathy. To go back to our unconditional love issue, I think that unconditional love is like a white light which includes a broad spectrum of frequencies. I think that today there are many people not playing according to the bigger plan. By sending a broad spectrum of frequencies, we may momentarily cancel the unharmonious frequencies, allowing the proper ones to re-establish harmony. We heal the ether in the same way that Lakhovsky was healing the body. Another explanation could be that by sending unconditional love, we change the properties of the surrounding ether by tuning it in such a way that it becomes more resonant to the bigger plan's frequencies. Whatever the explanation, everybody watching knows the impact he can have on a small group of people by being positive and full of energy. The goal of this project is to expand this effect to the whole world community. I will now describe the way I proceed. It is actually very simple. I try to raise within myself a strong feeling of love. Usually I do it by recalling some event in which I previously had experienced the right feeling, or more simply, by feeling a strong thankfulness and love for the person I want to cure. Sometimes I even do it by thinking simply at nature and how much it gives us each day. Maybe I also recall a beautiful landscape I have visited and try to re-experience the feeling I had back then. Whatever the way, the important thing is to have inside a strong feeling of love. It is not sufficient to have a thought of love. The feeling of love has to be experienced. It then has to be clearly stated within ourselves that no harm shall come to the subject of our concentration and everybody else, and that whatever we wish to happen should not happen if it somehow interferes with the rightful unfolding of the bigger plan. Somehow I ask for permission. I then concentrate on the subject of my work, be it a person, an animal, the climate, a group of people, or whatever, and try to send them the strong feeling of love I had previously raised within myself. I actually really love it, he, she, them, whoever it is. Whatever specific thought I want to add, I do it at this point. If I want to heal somebody, I do some kind of remote pranic healing. If I want to normalize the weather, I try to send a feeling of love towards the re-establishment of normal weather patterns. The love feeling usually slowly cools down, and then I finish by thanking for the opportunities that were given to me. It usually lasts no more than 15 minutes, with most of the time being only 5 to 7 minutes long. I then do other things and don't think about it anymore. The most important aspect is that throughout the whole process and in the following hours or days, there should not be any expectations for results. I do it because I want to help and it makes me feel good during the time I'm making it, the same way as with the gift example given above. I have the creative power to initiate a healing process, but I'm in no condition to decide whether it is the most rightful thing to happen according to the bigger plan. So I leave it to higher entities to decide whether results shall be obtained or not. No expectations. With this process, I believe that I have achieved in practice what I have presented before about the Kabbalah. I have raised love, which, through a specific mindset, is established to be unconditional and thus aligned with the bigger plan. I then give life to my motionless shape thoughts with this love energy, and I direct my thoughts to the subject of my work. This living thought then, if it shall be, will have an effect through the etheric on the physical level. So the thought gives shape to the sentiment energy, and the sentiment energy animates the shape created by the thought, so creating a living process. The more specific the shape thoughts is, the better the effects. To create proper specific thoughts, the only limit is the knowledge of the individual doing the work. And for this reason I have made this video, to allow all the participants to share the same thoughts. Later on I will more precisely define the characteristics that our thoughts may have. In my experience, when the described procedure is done properly, the energy in the various bodies of man raises to really high levels and can sometimes become overwhelming. Therefore, it is normal and preferable that the really strong unconditional love moments usually only last a few seconds and then cool down again, maybe with further repetition after a short period of time. The advice is to let it freely flow without forcing it to stay for longer periods of time at the highest levels, and to try to damp it down a little when it swells too much. I have reasons to believe that the first of such experiences I have had in my life was a determinant factor of a consequent depression crisis. I will now shortly recount of a few such experiences I have had so far. The first time I used the technique I was in Guatemala, at a Mayan site called Tikal. The site is immersed in pluvial jungle and consists of a series of pyramids and temples, some of which are still partly covered by the jungle. I was together with my brother, my sister, a close friend, and her 2.5-year-old daughter. There also was a young Mexican man whom we had met at the site. The place was powerful, and the thick jungle, together with the animal world and the ancient temples, made the life energy palpable. It wasn't hard at all to raise the feeling of love. At a certain point during our visit it started to rain. After some time I proposed the following experiments to my friends. we should inhale the powerful life energy of the place and give it back to the surrounds by adding a desire that the rain would stop to allow us to further enjoy the sight. The fact that no expectations had to be there was also made clear. So everyone had his thoughts for a short while, and then we went to the top of a secondary pyramid that was little visited, not being among the main attractions of the site. All of a sudden, we observed a blue circle of clear sky just above the pyramid we were on. The clouds were very low, so it was clearly visible. For the period of 2 hours that we spent on top of that pyramid, the blue circle stayed and we had no rain, while in the surrounding jungle it kept on raining. The experiment was later repeated at other sites with similar, if not so obvious, results. In another occasion, by following the technique described above, I was able to remotely eliminate a serious back problem my mother had. According to witnesses, I was at home, she was at work in the office. Until my intervention, she was hardly able to rise from her chair and kept on asking the secretary to bring her the documents she needed. Then, all of a sudden, she stood up and started going around the office and got all the things she needed by herself. Nobody was able to understand what had happened until I later talked to my dad and told him what I had done. I honestly didn't expect such immediate and powerful results. I have since then done this various times for my close relatives, always with significant results. Of course, it's quite easy to raise a strong feeling of love for your close relatives. The latest experiment, which also introduces a new element, was done during summer. The area where I live has always been famous for its sunny weather, but 6 years ago reality didn't comply with this fame. In September 2012, rainy and cold weather started. It lasted all through autumn, then winter, then spring, to the point that still in May, which normally has fair weather, we still had less than 15 degrees Celsius and rain on most days. I have to add now that I have built a device in the past which is supposed to allow to work on the atmosphere. I will later better describe the device and its function. Suffices now to say that by the end of May I decided to do an intervention. I used the technique described above together with the device. What I asked to happen was not the termination of rain, but I just oriented my thoughts and feelings on the re-establishment of normal weather patterns, whatever that may bring. The operation lasted about 10 days, during which I would set up the device every 2 days for about 30 minutes to 2 hours and apply the technique at the same time for a few minutes. Fact is that after 2 weeks from the first intervention, sunny and very hot weather started for a couple of days. Then we had again some rain for 3-4 days, and after that it was pretty much sunny for the rest of the summer, well into September. It wasn't always sunny, there were also rainy days, but mostly in the classical tropical thunderstorm style that we have in this area during summer. A few interesting features of this summer are the following. People report that it has been nicely warm, but not the humid, polluted, suffocating warm that we usually have. There have been fewer hailstorms than usual, and the tiger mosquito, a non-native mosquito which the previous year invaded the region, has been rarely seen, at least at my place. Of course, the doubt has always been there that all these examples just happened by chance, and that my intervention and that of the people who participated in the experiments had no influence on the events. Honestly, I have no way to scientifically prove that these events happen because of my or our intervention. In the first half of the 20th century, another important scientist made groundbreaking discoveries. Wilhelm Reich was a psychiatrist who started to study some biological effects that could be observed on psychically diseased patients. He noticed that some emotions could be measured electrically on the patient's skin. A long set of experiments brought him to the discovery of an energy closely related to life, which he called orgone energy. He developed devices which could handle this energy both for healing patients as well as for modifying weather patterns. In fact, he theorized that the same energy that he discovered flowing in his patient's body was observable in the development of clouds and, more generally, in weather patterns. With his devices, he was successful in healing some of his patients as well as in healing the atmosphere. After his death, the science he developed was brought forth by a series of other scientists, and there are now a lot of scientific studies which prove his concepts and principles. Some of his followers associated orgone energy with the etheric level of existence. From my research and experiments, I agree with this view. The weather device I have built significantly differs from the original Reich devices, even though some of the main elements are there. Reich describes a whole set of specific procedures during operation with his devices, in which the device has to be moved pointing at the sky in a complicated and specific manner. So to raise fog there is a set of movements, to cause rain there is another one, to destroy clouds even another one, and so on. The difficulties to build such a versatile device, together with the fear of doing something wrong and cause undesired results, brought me to look for a more general, easy-to-use device. I ended up studying a group of Reich's followers who developed just such a device with the general purpose of simply energizing the atmosphere to destroy chemtrails. Chemtrails is the name given to normal airplane contrails, which some people believe are made with the purpose of spreading chemicals in the atmosphere. Compared to contrails, chemtrails last much longer in the sky and don't disappear within 10-15 minutes as usually happens with contrails. Sometimes they even develop into clouds. Whether this is true or not I can hardly say, but there are reports suggesting that specific chemicals like barium and others have been found in the ground of areas allegedly sprayed. Whatever the truth, the device these people suggested looked good to me for the purposes I intended to use it. I applied different modifications like the possibility to disassemble it, which was not possible in the original design, as well as the usage of different, more organic materials. The constant thought that I had while designing it and building it was to create a device that would simply heal the atmosphere and nothing more. The necessity to be able to disassemble it derived from the fact that if you take a specific medicine to heal whatever ailment you have, you won't simply keep on taking it forever. In the same way, if I send some energy to heal the atmosphere, when it is healed I want to be able to stop sending the energy. From the first operation, which was done to stop a 3-month-long drought in the region, I got the feeling that my thoughts were somehow relevant to the functioning of the device. Back then, the device was left standing for 6 days in a row, and on the 7th day it started raining. No mental programming or usage of the technique was done on that operation, besides the thought of stopping the drought. Other few similar operations were done with encouraging results. I have always been very careful when using the device, and I generally use it less than maybe would be needed only when I really think that the weather has deviated for a long time from the normal weather patterns of the region. The fact that, depending on the situation and the desired results, I have been able to both start the rain as well as to stop it, reinforces the idea that there is a link between my thoughts and the device. With the latest operation, I have started to think that the device somehow is a resonator for my thoughts and sentiments at the etheric level, and thus empowers my thoughts in the same way that a musical instrument gives physical existence to the musician's thoughts and sentiments. Somehow I have to play it, and the sound that will come out depends on my thoughts, in a similar manner as it happens with the musical instrument. It is my intention to use the device in the proposed project. After the last operation, which determined sunny and healthy weather for 3 months, I have thought about it for a long time. What mostly hit me was the realization that the effects of the operation went far beyond the weather factors. Through better weather, in fact, people's mood was happier, and news channels have reported a very good quality wine yield this year. It is interesting to know that while the flowering of grape plants was more than 2 weeks late compared to previous years because of the cold and rainy spring, the proper grape sugar levels that determine the ripening for harvest arrived only 3 days late. In a similar manner, it is quite logical to assume that also the hotel and restaurant businesses have had a good summer. The effects of the operation had thus gone right down to the most physical level. The idea started to take shape that in the same manner, but with more specific thoughts about it, even the present social and human situations could somehow be helped. The idea that I propose is to join efforts by working together using something similar to the inner technique described above, as well as the device I have built to send a powerful input of unconditional love to the whole population of the Earth. The result we wish to achieve is simply a better world for us and for future generations. But we have to define in detail what a better world would look like. I include here a list of my personal ideas, and I invite everyone to develop his own ideas. As I said before, the more detailed our shape thought is, the better the possible results. A world where innovative, non-polluting technologies are welcomed and properly utilized. A world where environmental concerns are on top of all political agendas. A world where free thinking is actively stimulated. A world where corporate corruption of politicians is stopped. A world where really everyone benefits of the human rights as already stated by the United Nations Chart. A world where violence and war decline. A world where greed declines. A world where the economy is based on science. A world where all people have a satisfactory and useful job. A world where all people have a satisfactory and healthy home. A world where medicine returns to be practiced for the real improvement of people's health. A world where media report the truth and stop being instruments for corporate political agendas. A world where scholars and scientists are open-minded and incorruptible. A world where children are grown in the most loving environments, both at home as well as in the local communities. A world where all people have the right to healthy food. A world where everyone starts to really consider himself as a citizen of planet Earth. Many more points may be added to the list by the time you are ready to start. One may notice among the listed topics that some are primary causes and some are secondary causes. For instance, the present world economy may be held partially responsible for so many people not having proper food or housing. The fact is that human societies have become very complicated institutions, and we need to go through a detailed thinking process to identify the things that don't work. I clarify this point by adding the next step in the proper creation of the shape thought. Once we have recognized a set of human realities that need to be changed in order to achieve our goal, we have to identify in detail the individuals that are in a position to affect that specific problem. For example, on the issue of healthy food, we may recognize all the governmental employees, as well as the lawmakers and representatives that vote, analyze and define healthy food policies. Also, we don't have to forget the farmers. All the people who have something to do with food policies and food creation become the subject of our unconditional love in one specific session. The more precise the thought, the better the possible results. One may even think to send some love to individuals he considers in a position to change something. But, I repeat, not with the expectation that he will change things according to my ideas, but in an open manner. Like if through your love you were showing the person an alternative that he may or may not decide to implement according to his own will and ideas. It is now time to make a short digression and reconnect to the part about the evolution of mankind. Through its evolution, man is now in the condition that the I-body is at a good point in its incarnation on Earth, and man has used the related power to modify the environment according to its wishes. This modification of the environment has been done with the same moral values that were understandably in use 200 years ago, when the earth was still so big compared to the number of its inhabitants that no regard had to be taken for its preservation. Things have changed, the population has grown, new powerful machines have been built that can do the work of many people in many days in a matter of hours, and the environment has been accordingly destroyed. In the same manner, human values and relationships, through a series of powerful technologies as well as human movements, have faded. Who is responsible for this? Some bad guy may be identified, but I believe that in the end the real reason was a foreseeable possible consequence of the incarnation of the I. Like a child, the little god on earth had to touch the hot stove, even if warned, before believing that it burns the skin. In this view, all men become responsible for the present situation, but the victims of it as well. This is because they are grown in an unhealthy environment with unhealthy teachings and today with almost inexistent moral values. And when they grow, they start working for the system, thus bringing forth, in most cases, the same reality that they were grown in. This way, the initial distortion is carried on from generation to generation, often worsened by the invention of a new technology applied without the appropriate moral steps. Victims and unaware guilty parties at the same time. When things are seen this way, it may become clear that most human beings have just been involuntarily deceived by the realities they were grown in, and that with proper love, they may even only slightly but still change their perception of life and the consequent life activity. Every one of the readers may recall a time in his life when he still had no clear ideas about the system or even supported it. Everyone will understand that a final judgment of his own person back then would not reflect the truth of the whole story, because he has changed in the meantime. By thinking this way, it becomes possible to love even somebody we consider the worst person, because we can simply see it as someone who still needs to understand some things, but nonetheless deserves a chance. By loving them, we give them our chance. More we cannot do, but it still may be a lot, and the sum of many small changes could promote further changes and the initial distortion slowly straightened. I actually think that the time is ripe and many important changes have already happened in the last years. We may help in creating more Snowdens and Assange, the modern-day martyrs. They and their situations show that there are people ready to risk everything to get out of the schemes, and there are even people ready to welcome them and give them protection, in this case the governments of Ecuador and Russia. Our purpose is to help such people to recognize the right step to do. These two people have changed more in the last couple of years than probably all the humanitarian agencies put together. They stepped alone into the international arena and claimed, through their released information, a right to speak. Many people are sniffing the scent of the truth, but they are scared to recognize it and implement the consequent proper line of actions in their jobs and social life. By establishing with our persons unconditional love sources, we may help them gain the courage to step up and positively influence their environment. In this video I have set out my personal philosophy of life backed by years of studies and life experiences. I have shown in detail the technique developed over the years and the possible results. The purpose of this video was to share my personal insights. Anyone can then apply his own technique in the way he better feels about it. The device which I will use can be substituted by a powerful earth place of your choice, which can amplify your work. There are innumerable such places. It is no chance that most temples and churches have always been built on top of mountains. It is up to your sensitivity to identify and use such a place. I am aware that this video is not complete and that there may be future correction to some interpretations given herein, after more knowledge and experience has been gathered. This is as far as I have come at the present time. Maybe a better synchronized job could possibly create a more powerful effect. due to the fact that the recipients of this video live in faraway places, a much bigger effort would be needed to do synchronized work. I'm open to this possibility if we all agree on wanting to do this. On the other hand, as a consequence of the things exposed before, this is the time of individuals, so it may be that this job should be done individually. Also, because the recipients are living in different places, we can have a more widespread effect. The issue of timing could also be better studied. Since the physical world is the result of cosmic radiation, and since cosmic bodies have rotations and revolutions, there are rhythms on Earth. In this perspective, times could certainly be identified when it is more convenient to do an operation, but this goes beyond my present knowledge. I hope this video will somehow be useful.